my journey as a scientist and as an entrepreneur. And so thank you to Superposition for having me today. So, we're going to start from the very beginning. So, it all began with an observation and the questions that followed. And so, how did that come about? So, when I was 14, I was doing what any 14-year-old does, which is start questioning about what my place in the world is. Like, what am I supposed to do? What am I, like, why am I here, essentially? And so, one of the things that I noticed is that he was using a lot of the same methods for all of these different patients, and it seemed super cutting edge, really cool science. But the thing is that when he went from patient to patient to patient, it was like a very different range of prognoses. What does that mean? That means that what he was telling the patients, their outcomes, they ranged greatly. So he'd tell one patient that, like, oh, you're totally good. You don't need to come back until about 2 years later, just to make sure that the cancer hasn't come back. And other people, he'd say something as serious as, you have about 4 to 5 months, like, make sure your papers are in order and spend time with your family, right? Like, there's a huge range of outcomes, but he's applying the same science. So I began wondering, why doesn't the same treatment work for all types of cancers? And also, the bigger question, which is, why haven't we cured cancer yet? Because as far as I'm concerned, and I'm sure you're well aware, like, billions of money and also a lot of resources are just funneled into cancer research all the time. And like, it's really interesting to see that this super intensive problem has not yet been solved despite all of those resources being invested into it. So with these two questions as my guide, I started on this journey. So let's move along. So what do I do when I have a question? What do you do when you have a question? You turn to the internet. You Google things and you try to figure out what on earth is going on. And so that's exactly what I did. It started with like Google searches, and then I moved on to more academic resources such as Cell and PubMed. And this was back in like fall 2016. I was still 14. And so I read and I tried to figure out what on earth was going on. And so after absorbing all that information, I came out with a research proposal. Pretty much after gathering all of this information, I had some questions of my own, things that people hadn't tried yet that I wanted to try, because at that age, like I mean, not just at that age, but I was just really curious to see, like, there are so many undone projects that scientists haven't tapped into yet, and I started coming up with a few of my own. So I took that research proposal and I really ran with it. And by ran with it, I mean I reached out to a bunch of people. So I sent out more than 200 emails to professors all around where I live, and I used to live in South Florida, and so I got literally more than 100 rejections, but I got one single positive response from this lady. Her name's Lindsay Rhodes. And so she gave me a chance, and she said, like, the proposal is very well written, and she gave me a chance to actually do my research. And so from there, I was able to actually figure out what on earth was going on with my proposal. Directly following that, I got accepted to join the American Association for Cancer Research. And so this was November 10, 2016, which is actually, that was the day after my 15th birthday when I got this acceptance. And what I found out is that I would be able to take my research, take my results, and go to the American Association for Cancer Research's big main conference, their annual meeting. And it's actually the largest cancer research conference in the world. And so I didn't really know what I was in for at the time, but what wound up happening is I went to the conference, I presented my research. I look really young in that picture, but that kind of explains like the scope of this journey. So I went to this conference, I presented my research, and I met incredible figures in the cancer field. And so actually pictured in the top right are two professors named, well, this one's Doug Hanahan, the other one's Bob Weinberg. Bob Weinberg goes on to play a very important role in my life. But the two of them together created one of the most, actually the most cited paper in all of science, which is The Hallmarks of Cancer. And Robert Weinberg discovered an oncogene, which is essentially, he discovered what oncogenes are, which is the genetic mechanisms that allow cancer to happen. And then this person who also becomes relevant in my story, this is Leonard Zahn, and he is the director of the Harvard Stem Cell Institute. So moving on, working at Harvard Part 1. So this was summer 2017. I was taking classes. I was also shadowing and doing research. At this point in time, I was shadowing and looking into leukemia, which is cancers of the blood, and also lymphomas. So moving on, I went home to Florida, and these are all pictures from my lab in Florida. And so if you look here, these are actually cells that I genetically manipulated to express this gene called nodal. So what do I mean by that? Essentially, so DNA and genetics, all it really is are the blueprints that tell your cells how to operate and how to live and what they're supposed to look like and do. And so essentially what I did is I was able to tap into those blueprints and change it just a little bit. And that tweaking changed the way it looked entirely. And so if you look, they kind of look like little spiders with spicules coming out because I changed it in a way to make it a little bit more aggressive than the average cell. Moving along. So I went back to the conference and I presented. And again, I ran into one of my colleagues, I suppose, or mentors. She gave a plenary talk, and so this is a picture of us. But I also got to present my research again, and that was the project I just briefly spoke about, which was talking about how changing that specific gene changes the ways that breast cancer cells proliferate and grow and interact with each other. So yes, moving on to August 2018. So what wound up happening is a local newspaper found out about what I was trying to accomplish and what I'd done so far. And so they published this article about me. And essentially what happened was at this point in time, I realized that it's really hard to find good mentors. And it's also really difficult to pave your way in your field in STEM because over and over again, every time I met someone, I had to overcome a number of boundaries. First of all, I needed to establish that I was intelligent and credible. And I also had to establish that you're constantly making the argument that, yes, I am worth your time. And yes, I know what I'm talking about. And also, just constantly presenting your ideas requires that you are able to present yourself in such a way. And so one of the things that I'd realized along the way over and over again throughout all of these interactions is that I really wish I had a mentor or a mentorship program in this kind of a way. And that really brought me to the point in time where I was like, wow, I kind of wish I had a mentorship program, which is really how the STEMinist movement came about. So the STEMinist movement is my nonprofit, and what we do is we work to mitigate the STEM gender gap at every level in the pipeline, all the way from providing education programming to middle school girls, all the way up until universities where we build communities in that department. But also Segal, who I ran into many times over the years, she also is pictured here, and she's been a wonderful advocate and mentor for me. She helped me write my cover letters and refine my resumes for when I would apply to jobs and positions. And so she was a wonderful ally to have, and I just happened to run into her at one of these conferences. So moving on to the growth of the STEMinist movement. So this is a picture of the first STEMinist movement workshop. And as you can see, many of us are holding a DNA model. So the topic of the first workshop was why haven't we cured cancer yet, which is another one of my favorite talks to give. And a big part of that is we put together a DNA double helix so that we're able to talk about and really look at that underlying blueprint that tells cells how they work. So next, this came out, and it was, this came out, and in addition to that, I started receiving a lot of coverage for the STEMinist movement in addition to sponsorships for the organizations. in February 2019, I mean not in the month, but I was invited to be the keynote speaker at the American Cancer Society's annual fundraiser. It's called the Bucket List Bash. But I gave a talk about my work on cancer, how I became inspired, and how what a privilege it was to be on this side of the bench and be on this side of cancer, which is to look into research and to look into possible cures. In addition to that, I gave a talk for the American Association of University Women. They had a conference, and I gave a talk on why I love STEM and why I love STEAM, which includes arts, because the arts are also a big part of my life. This is me also at the conference, but we are dissecting a cow eye together. So flash forward to April 2019, where I'm presenting another one of my projects at the conference, and this is Bob Weinberg again, who has helped me over the years. He has advocated for me, helped me get into certain positions. He's also helped me with the Feminist movement when it comes to creating programming and making sure everything is educationally sound. And in addition to this, these lovely ladies invited me to be on their podcast called The Steministas. And so I talked about, I didn't realize it at the time. I wasn't aware of the term ageism prior to doing this talk, but I was talking about how if you are aware enough and if you are confident enough, you can accomplish much more than what people expect for our age. And at that point, I was 17. And so moving on, after that, surprise, I went to college because that happens. And so I'm here at Cornell. So my first semester here, I gave a talk. It was a TEDx style talk, but I presented my old research where I was talking about nodal in breast cancer. And then in addition to that, I also had two tremendous opportunities come up. One was that I got sponsored as an entrepreneur, which made me really embrace my work with the feminist movement because I had that support. And in addition to that, I got a job working for one of the individuals who I had met 4 years prior at that cancer research conference. And so I was able to explore during that time. Also during the summer it was last summer 2020. We established 3 chapters of the feminist movement at UC San Diego, Northeastern, and Cornell. And yes, between from 2017 to 2020, I was able to I got a position working in the Zahn lab, and that honestly fulfilled a dream that I had had since I was literally 15 years old. So that was a lot. And so a few lessons that I've learned along the way. First of all, professional persistence is key. And so what does that mean? That means keeping in touch, continuing to ask for positions and opportunities and seeing if there's availability. Just because somebody said just because there's nothing explicitly available, continuing to ask and continuing to advocate for yourself is always a good idea. And if you do that for long enough, you will get opportunities. Take risk outside your comfort zone and don't fear rejection. So when I applied to the American Association for Cancer Research, that's like a huge organization for professional people with degrees and degrees and degrees, an alphabet of degrees following their last name. And I didn't have any of that. But what I did have was this profuse curiosity that drove me to want to learn more. And because of that, I was able to tap my way in and find my place within this organization. Literally the worst thing that can happen when you take these kinds of risks is that they say no. And saying no is harmless. It's especially harmless over email because it's not even to your face. Yes. Oop. Oop. So be wary of those who take credit for your success. So this is actually an article that my high school institution published about me, which was implying that the STEMness movement was something that was done at the school when in reality it was not. And so they essentially twisted the story and decentralized it from me in order to make it seem like something. And this was for a fundraiser thing, which is why I was wary and surprised that they phrased it like that. So keep in touch with your mentors. So over the years, Bob Weinberg has become kind of like a grandpa figure to me. He's mentored me and helped me along the way. When it comes to creating programming for the STEMness movement, advising me with my career, and also just helping me make decisions throughout my everyday life. Well, not my everyday life, professional, big decisions, but yes. So give back and help others along their journey. So this is actually kind of funny. I This talk I gave about entrepreneurship before I really considered myself to be a full-on entrepreneur. But yes, I've done a lot of outreach work. I love giving presentations like these, particularly to younger girls, and I love talking about my journey and their journeys and their interests. And outreach is one of my passions. And of course, last but not least, don't forget those who helped you get to where you are today. So this is my high school graduation and my beautiful family, and this is the day they dropped me off at Cornell. So at this point in time, I want to thank you for listening. I've done a lot of talking, and I know I've shared a lot about my life, and so I want to decentralize this conversation to instead focus on you all. I would love to chat with you, get to know your interests, and see how we can make this like conversation beneficial to you, because ultimately that's the whole point of this story. I want it's supposed to be an inspiring one, and I'd love to hear about your interests and your journeys.
What inspired you to pursue like STEM fields and pursue your career in STEM? Like, was there anything specifically in high school that you did to like especially help you pursue that career? Or how did you narrow down your interest in high school to eventually realize that cancer research and like going into STEM field was exactly what you wanted to pursue?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Sachi. So I think in high school, the thing that really narrowed it down for me wasn't actually the classes. I'm not. Yeah, I would definitely say it's not quite the classes. One of the things that I really like emphasizing in STEM education and everything to do with that is that um, like I think I much prefer it when they frame it around what we don't know rather than what we do know. Because what I see over and over and over is that STEM is like way oversimplified, or it turns into like a memorization game, and then from there you just kind of lose the wonderment of it. Instead, framing it around like discovery, like learning the rules in order to break the rules, in order to make these massive developments in science, I really like framing it in that perspective. Um, I think for me, the choice was really in the curiosity that came about because of cancer research and cancer biology.
So I have a question. So do you have any advice for like us high school students that are interested in pursuing some similar path?
Yeah, definitely. Do you want to expand upon your like what path you're thinking? Like, are you hopefully pre-med or something?
So I'm thinking doing something in the intersection of like something like biomedical genetic engineering, something like that. So the intersection of medicine, but also a little bit of engineering because I'm interested in both. So maybe, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So of course, I don't know the ins and outs of what's available like in your specific area, but honestly, just looking like combing the internet for opportunities, reading up as much as possible. Like it's very early in your career to already start drilling down. Like I'm even personally surprised at how specialized I've gotten, even though I'm literally in my second year at university. But my advice to you would be to keep up on current events. Like by current events, I mean the scientific current events, right? Like what are people discovering like in specific fields, and what are like the new applications that are coming out. And so keeping yourself up to date with everything that's going on and the underlying science is honestly the best thing you can do. Because when you do have that break and you are talking with people who have the ability to give you those connections and those opportunities, being able to show what you know and having that longitudinal knowledge will be crucial for both now and in the future when you're in college. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I would suggest. Yeah, I genuinely think that's it, especially since you're interested in genetics and genetic engineering. It's such a fast-moving field that that's honestly what I would recommend.
Yeah, so just hearing about all the things like you were able to manage was like really like interesting. So like how did you manage your time when doing your research and studying and running your nonprofit?
Definitely, yeah. Thanks for asking that. I think I'm not gonna lie. When I was in high school, I was not great at managing my time. I did not sleep that much. I sleep a lot more now, and I still do the things that I do. So I can give a couple recommendations. First of all, be sure to front load your work. What do I mean by that? Do your work before you do anything vestigial in your life. And also be constantly thinking about, am I doing this in the most efficient way possible? Um, like just be thinking about, like, if you yourself don't need to like, this is a matter of organization, not like homework, but like for example with the STEMinist movement, one of the questions I always ask myself is, do I, Annabella, need to do this task? And if I myself do not need to handle it directly, delegate it to someone else, because that is for my own like sanity and sustainability, and that's also to prepare like whoever I'm handing it off to eventually take on more responsibility. In addition to that, when it comes to my schoolwork and stuff like that, I would just say I multitasking is a non-negotiable. If I'm studying, I want to get it done like as quickly as possible. I want to understand and accomplish what I need to do in the shortest amount of time. And the way you do that is not multitask, get down to it, do it, be done. And it doesn't work for everybody. Like, I know a lot of people who like intermingling everything, but I think being very deliberate with where you place your time and where what you do is going to be extremely beneficial to you and your time and your sleep.
Actually, specifically in regards to like, being a senior and going into college, did you find that like going into college and being in college was more academically flexible than you originally thought it would be? So like for example, like when you shift from high school to college, was there anything different that you realized that you might have not realized before?
Oh, entirely. You unlock, like, the freedom is so overwhelming. And also I have to, I'm not a freshman anymore, obviously. But I'm an RA for, I'm a resident advisor for freshmen. So I actually live with, I'm in charge of, I watch over 86 freshmen here. It's actually quite funny. I don't mean to brag, but our building is where Ruth Bader Ginsburg lived when she went to Cornell. And so whenever I walk around and walk down the hall, her room, nobody lives in her room, but it's covered in like sticky notes. Okay, sorry, sidebar. Going back to talking about entering freshman year, the freedom is extremely overwhelming. You have such agency over your schedule, and college courses where you're like sitting in the classroom, they might take up 3 hours of your entire day, and the rest of your day is yours for the like for whatever you want to do. um and so with that in mind, I think, I'm not sure if you've heard this adage, but pretty much for every hour you spend in lecture or in the classroom, you're supposed to be spending 3 hours outside the classroom, like studying, practicing, working on whatever it is that they teach you. So my advice to you is, again, have a lot of agency over what you do. It's always nice to go with the flow, like find your crew, but also it's good to establish boundaries and be very self-aware of what is good for you academically, what is good for you socially, what is good for you emotionally. And when you keep all of those things in mind, and you have that constant reflection, you will truly be making the most out of your college experience. Now I'm not saying that like don't have fun and like let loose every once in a while, but in all honesty, like I see people make not great decisions all the time. And so just being aware of how crucial this time is for your development as a person as well as an academic, obviously. Um, just being very careful about where you spend your time and how you spend your time. Yeah.
Yeah, so I learned that you did a lot of research, so I wanted to know like how a normal day would go for you while you were conducting your research. Like, what would you do?
Yeah, definitely. I'm actually the reason why I'm smiling as you asked that is I literally just made like a reel, like an Instagram reel, on like a day in the life for me. I'm not posting it until like next week though, because that's on the schedule. That's why I'm laughing. All right. But yeah, so do you want me to talk about research as a high schooler or research as a college student?
I think research as a high school student, probably.
Yes. So I'm not for me, my school would always end at 3:20. And so when that would happen, I would drive to the next town over, where the university was. It was called Florida Gulf Coast University, FGCU. And so I would drive on over, and then I would be there from like 4 until like 7 or 8 p.m. depending on what I was doing. I did a lot of cell culture. So imagine like flasks like yay big, plastic filled with this pink fluid, and on the very bottom are a layer of cancer cells. And then from there I would do a number of experiments with them. I might just need to feed them, like give them more sugar to keep them going. But I might do some other tests, like do cell counts, like image them, see how invasive see how invasive they are, see like their migrating patterns, like they're birds. Their migrating patterns in like between different types of membranes. Um, and then when the clock rolled around like 7 to 8 to even 9 p.m., I would I would pick up dinner, and then I would drive home and then do homework from like 10 p.m. until like 1:30, and then I would do it all over again. Get up at like either 6:30 or 7 and then go to school at 8. Yeah.
So did you like know Cornell was like your dream college from like a young age, and like how did you decide? Like I'm sure you probably got into like a lot of crazy colleges.
Yes, yes. Well, first of all, thank you. I appreciate it. I chose Cornell because Cornell had a really, like, I know in pop culture, Cornell gets ripped on a lot, and I'm aware of that. Like, yeah, do y'all watch The Office? Like, or am I? Yes, okay. I was like, is that generational? I don't know. Am I that old? I don't think so. Um, alrighty. So yeah, so I knew it was Cornell for me. Um, when honestly, I wasn't super sure until after I finished my first semester. So when I chose to come here, I was like, okay, it first of all, it's very well connected, and it's also a very well-known name. And honestly, that's something that everybody says, like that should not be your priority, that should not be a thing. But the truth of the fact is that like that is something to take into consideration when it is a name that you will keep tied to yours for the rest of your life when it comes to everything professional. But in addition to that, the warmth that I felt when I visited, so I got one of those letters, like they're called likely letters. You've probably heard of them, where prior to the actual acceptance date, um, I think only Ivies do it. I think only Ivy Leagues do it. Correct me if I'm wrong. But they send you a letter and they're like, hey, just a heads up, you're gonna be accepted. And so when I got my likely, I also got an invitation and they flew me up here to check out everything. And honestly, I felt so welcomed. I did a similar experience at another Ivy League in Massachusetts that won't be named, but it was so not as warm. I think my host forgot about me or something. But when I came here, I felt welcomed. I loved the classes. The campus was so varied. I'm not sure if you've ever seen pictures of Cornell, but all of the buildings like have completely different personalities and vibes because all of them reflect the time period in which they were built. But there's also an intensive like outdoor culture where there's a lot of celebration around sustainability and the earth and agriculture, which is something that I find very interesting. Um, what else? So yes, honestly, it was how welcoming the people were, the academic rigor of the programming. Like at some point in time, there's not that much difference when it comes to the academic rigor. Like once you reach a certain like type of school, like I would say Cornell. I mean, Cornell is very much a STEM rigorous school, considering like Cornell Engineering and like CALS is also famous. CALS is the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, and so when you reach a point in time where like you have all of these schools that pretty much offer like the same level of rigor when it comes to the academics, you have to boil it down to the personality of the institution and like and what your goals are for yourself. And so one of the things that I found particularly profound when I was a senior and making these decisions is that like when you're picking a college, you're really picking the type of person you want to be. And I know that that sounds like, oh, that's a big deal, but like yes and no, right? Like no matter what, you make the decisions about who you're going to be and what kind of role you're going to play in this world. But with the environment that shapes you during these ultra formative years, just being mindful about like how varied do I want my experiences to be, like, and do I want urban, do I want suburban, do I want to be in the middle of nowhere, right? Like just thinking about all of those different aspects um plays a really important role in where you ultimately wind up.
Yeah, I think one more thing a lot of people are interested in learning about is like new advances or discoveries in the cancer field in general. Like maybe some of the research work that you've done that are like take part in those new discoveries or just in general, because that's definitely a very interesting field.
Yeah, definitely. Um, I'm also involved with research here at Cornell. And what we do is we're working to repurpose a drug. So, have you heard of schizophrenia? Okay, awesome. So, well, schizophrenia is not awesome, but it's awesome that you know about it. So, schizophrenia is treated with this drug called thioridazine, but thioridazine also has a secondary purpose that we are currently investigating and trying to prove. What is that? So, I work in testicular germ cell tumors, so I work with like testes. And so, what we are seeing is that thioridazine actually has a potential to treat TGCTs, so testicular cancer, and so what we're trying to do is take that drug, repurpose it for the purpose of cancer. And so since it's already passed FDA approval and everything, it's pretty much just taking a drug and proving its efficacy. I work in mouse models and I do a lot of imaging and staining. And because I have a pretty robust CS background, I do a lot of quantification and optimization for gene expression of those pictures that I make and take. So that's one thing. But if we want to talk about another development in the field that I'm really excited about, I want to chat a bit about CAR T cells. Does anybody know what a CAR T cell is? Okay, awesome. That makes this so much more exciting. Okay, so do you know what a T cell is? Does anybody want to tell me what a T cell is? This is not, you go for it.
I might explain it wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's a type of like white blood cell that's pretty important to like protecting your body from like obviously
Brilliant.
immune system. Yeah.
Perfect. Yes. So, what a CAR T cell is so when I was your age, this was actually not mildly controversial because when the first time they tried it in patients, these cells went crazy and were killing everything. However, now they were able to refine the science. So what it is institutions like Memorial Sloan Kettering and like MD Anderson and like all these really wonderful cancer institutions, what they're able to do is take patients who have a certain type of cancer and who are eligible, take a sample of their blood, isolate their T cells, so those white blood cells, that fight things. And what they're able to do is take those T cells and fuse a CAR to it, not vroom vroom CAR. CAR stands for chimeric antigen receptor. So chimeric means like of an animal or like organism that is not its own. So like we're applying it to a patient, Homo sapien, human, right? So chimeric means like, okay, it might be like from a rabbit or from a horse, something like that, or from a cow. And so antigen is like the markers that sit outside cells that tell other cells the identity of that cell. And then receptor is like, well, it's like a little grabby claw that sits on the outside of the cell. So what scientists do is they create those like specialized grabby claw things, and they fuse it to patients' T cells, and then they reintroduce them back into their patient's body. Why does that work for cancer? Well, those little grabby receptor things, those are specially programmed to detect whatever type of cancer it is that they have. And so when they reinstate it into the patient's body, first of all, it's the patient's own cells, so immune response will not attack them. Second of all, it's specialized for their cancer, so it's able to detect and also send the immune system after their specific tumor. And one part that is, I'm not sure if it's in theory or if it's actually done at this point, but the idea of a kill switch. So like after these engineered cells are introduced into patients' bodies, they are able to like induce apoptosis of specifically those CAR T cells, so the engineered cells, in order to ensure that they don't cause any additional damage to native tissue. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think that's super exciting. And I think the concept is really cool. We don't work on that here at Cornell, so I'm not able to participate in that type of research specifically. But later on down the line, I have a couple ideas for how we might be able to expand upon the idea.
So, do you have any suggestions about like getting like shadowing opportunities or just like opportunities in general, like during COVID? Because I think it's been like a little bit harder for like some of us. So,
Yeah, it's definitely difficult, especially during COVID. So my advice for you is, well, first of all, what are your interests? What are your goals?
I think I'm really interested in like women's health. I like as of right now, I want to become like some kind of OBGYN, but yeah, I just really like women's health in general, and I've always wanted to be a doctor. So
And what year are you?
I'm a junior.
Gotcha. So, first of all, thank you for sharing that with me, Shushki. Okay, so I've got a couple pieces of advice for you. First of all, if you know that you have this interest already, I suppose it's important to reflect upon like why are you interested in shadowing at this point in time. And I also want to emphasize to you that like shadowing is definitely great and it's an important step in our lives, but I also want to emphasize that there's a lot of ways to get involved, particularly with women's health. Like I'm sure, like because interactions with patients are few and far between, and since you are based in California, I think also laws are kind of not kind of, I think they are quite a bit tighter because of COVID regulations. Um, and so I want to encourage you to look for other opportunities to explore that interest. Like shadowing is great. Personal connections are great also if you are insistent on taking that route. But I know that that's not always a possibility for everybody, because I mean that's obviously a privilege to be able to just call up somebody and do something like that. But in addition to that, I want to talk about like other institutions. Like I'm sure like there are pregnancy clinics and community resources and other places where you might not necessarily directly work with patients and have that interface, but you can still expand upon your interests and get experience and serve those people for the purposes of your passion. Does that make sense? And I know also there's the obvious concern about or not concern, but thought regarding like college applications and the like. And I think this is this suggestion is kind of a creative way to accomplish that goal of furthering your interest and also be, COVID safe.
So I was just wondering how you were able to get such opportunities to shadow people at such a young age, because I know like most people would be like, oh, she probably doesn't have that much experience. I don't think it'd be a good idea. So I was just wondering like how you were able to reach out to a ton of people and get that opportunity.
Definitely, thank you. Um, so honestly, if there's one thing, well, no, not if there's one thing I want you to walk away with, but there is a profuse power in asking humbly and politely, because more often than not, people, particularly women, assume that they're going to be turned down or thought of that they're not good enough, or there's a variety of reasons that society has given us to believe that our requests and our thoughts will automatically be denied. um and so I have to, like, pretty much what I want to challenge all of you to do is to not be afraid to ask for favors and ask for help. Um, just by introducing yourself, telling a little bit about yourself, and also giving true reasons as to why you want to do something, um, gets you a long way. And of course, also acknowledging in your email or your call or whatever that, like, oh, I understand if you're busy, like give them an easy way out if they don't want to. But also just the power of the ask. That's one thing that, like, that's my answer to your question. And that's also something to apply at every single step in your life, whether that's asking for a shadowing opportunity, or like asking for a grant or asking for a position in someone's lab. um, do not underestimate the power of a well-written, humble, polite, strong email.
If you could give your past high school self like one piece of advice, or maybe a couple pieces of advice, like what would that be?
That is a great question. Probably, I mean, I don't know. And here's why. Because I feel like me in high school, I have a lot to learn. I thought I knew a lot. I didn't. I still don't. Right? And so I think what I would tell my high school self is just that, like, you're gonna work really, really, really hard, and I get that. And there's nothing I can say that can make you not do that. Um, but one thing is that, like, having that introspection is so, so, so important. Um, so taking time to reflect upon why are you doing things, and also, like, I suppose just like I keep coming back to, being deliberate about where you spend your time. Also, one other thing, because I don't know if any of you might feel this way, but I went to a very small high school, and it was also very, very white. I don't know if you all go to the same high school or whatever, or what the deal is in that department, but because of those experiences, it led to some big issues when it comes to, like, self-doubt and self-image. And so, in all honesty, I would say that the one thing I would tell myself is that, hey, it gets better, believe in yourself, continue believing in yourself, and you're not, like, you're pretty much, you're not crazy. It's going to get better. That's what I would tell myself, because high school was, if I'm being frank, it was a difficult time for me.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. I think I also think about a lot of those things as a high schooler. So yeah, it's definitely a valuable perspective.
Definitely, definitely. When you get to college, it's like, it's kind of, I don't want to say it's all on you, because honestly, at times when I'm making decisions about my life, I kind of think about it like caring for a baby. When, like, I'm not sure if any of you have ever had, like, a parent with, like, a baby at that time, but it's always like, are they hungry? Are they sleepy? Why are they fussy? Like, that's the kind of mindset I have about myself at this point in time. If I'm like, why can't I do my work? I'm like, am I hungry? Am I sleepy? Am I fussy? Like, do I need to do something physical? And that's the kind of mindset I use on myself, where I'm just like, I am my own baby and I need to take care of me, in addition to getting all this work done and being a very high voltage person.
when you were in high school and like when you like were emailing like lots and lots of professors, did you propose something like completely new that like science had like never exactly like seen before, or was it like based off of like other research, like you just wanted to like further something?
Yes, so that's a great question. And actually, let me see if I can find the proposal. It's a really, in hindsight, it's a very funny proposal, because of what I know now. But so I mean, this was my, I made this on Microsoft PowerPoint. Um, but essentially, this was my proposal. This is what I mass emailed to people. So I was like, this is the abstract for what I want to do. I'm like, this is the research I've done to like back up the fact that this I'm not crazy. This is how I want to figure it out. This is how I would design it. And then like this is what I would get out of it. And this is to prove that what I want to accomplish is founded in research. So this is what I emailed to everybody. Yes. I think honestly, like creating your own ideas, but also when you're reaching out to professors, like have ideas of your own, but also like demonstrate interest. I think the art of the cold email is definitely an important one to nail down. But just so long as you establish like who you are, establish your credibility, like talk about your academic status, and then like establish your curiosities, and then do the ask where it's like, I was wondering if, or do you, like, would you. And then at the end, like, thank you in advance for your consideration so that they know that you're asking for something. Because more often than not, particularly women, are very likely to put in a bunch of modifiers and not be super clear or concise about what they're asking. And I want to encourage you to not do that and to be concise, because that is how you get what you want/need.